I'm Michael Thompson, 38, a devoted father of two who believed in the power of forgiveness. After 15 years of marriage, I discovered my wife Sarah's affair through a text message left open on her phone. The betrayal cut deep, but I was prepared to work through it. For our family, for our boys. What I wasn't prepared for was the moment she threw that ceramic vase at my head when I asked her to end it. As I stood there, blood trickling down my temple, watching our 8-year-old son peek around the corner with terror in his eyes, I realized her affair wasn't the worst part of our marriage. It was what she was capable of when cornered. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. And what followed would reveal just how far someone will go to avoid losing control. If you've ever had to choose between staying for love and leaving for safety, subscribe for stories of courage and new beginnings. 6 months earlier, our family Christmas photo had captured what I thought was genuine happiness. Sarah's smile radiant beside me, Jake grinning with his missing front tooth, and little Tommy clutching his favorite stuffed elephant. We looked like the picture-perfect suburban family we'd worked so hard to become. I met Sarah in college, both of us studying at Northwestern. She was magnetic, confident, ambitious, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. I was drawn to her intensity, the way she could command a room without raising her voice. After graduation, we moved to Chicago, where I landed a software engineering position at a growing tech firm. While Sarah climbed the corporate ladder in marketing, our first years together felt like we were building something meaningful. We bought our house in Naperville when Sarah was pregnant with Jake, a 4-bedroom colonial with a big backyard and good schools. It represented everything we'd dreamed of: stability, success, a place to raise our children with the kind of childhood I'd always wanted. Jake arrived healthy and perfect, followed 3 years later by Tommy. Sarah returned to work after each maternity leave more driven than before, landing a director position at a prestigious marketing agency downtown. I admired her ambition, even when it meant longer hours and weekend conference calls. But somewhere along the way, the partnership we'd built began to shift. Sarah's success came with increasing demands, and I found myself managing more of the household responsibilities. I didn't mind. I actually enjoyed the bedtime stories, school pickups, and weekend soccer games. Being present for my boys felt more important than climbing any corporate ladder. The warning signs started small. Sarah would guard her phone, taking it to the bathroom, or keeping it face down during dinner. She began working late more frequently, citing important client meetings that couldn't be rescheduled. Weekend work trips became monthly occurrences, always to cities where major clients supposedly needed face-to-face attention. When I suggested we plan a family vacation last summer, she snapped about not having time for frivolous trips. When I brought up marriage counseling, something I'd been quietly considering for months, she laughed and said I was being dramatic about normal relationship challenges. I started walking on eggshells, carefully timing conversations about our relationship for moments when she seemed approachable. Those moments became increasingly rare. The woman who once sought my opinion on everything now made unilateral decisions about our finances, the kids' activities, even major household purchases. Looking back at that Christmas photo now, I can see what I missed then: the tension in Sarah's shoulders, the way her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes, the subtle distance between us even as we posed together. I was so focused on maintaining our family's happiness that I ignored the signs that Sarah had already checked out. Emotionally, the text message was still glowing on Sarah's phone screen when she walked back into the kitchen. "Can't wait to see you tonight. The hotel room is perfect. M." My stomach dropped as the implications hit me like a physical blow. 15 years of marriage, and this is how I discovered the truth. Sarah noticed my expression immediately. Her eyes darted to the phone in my hands, and for a split second, I saw something I'd never seen before: panic mixed with calculation. "We need to talk," I said quietly, setting the phone on the counter. "About what?" But her voice had that defensive edge I'd been hearing more often lately. "About Marcus, about the hotel rooms, about how long this has been going on." She crossed her arms, and I watched her cycle through emotions: surprise, denial, then anger. "You went through my phone? That's a violation of privacy, Michael." "Sarah, please, just tell me the truth." For a moment, I thought she might come clean, might show some remorse or willingness to work through this together. Instead, she doubled down. "You're being paranoid. Marcus is a colleague. We have business meetings." "Business meetings in hotel rooms?" "Sarah, I'm not stupid." Her laugh was cold. "Could have fooled me. You've been checked out of this marriage for years, Michael. Maybe if you paid half as much attention to me as you do to your precious coding projects. I've been trying to save our marriage for months. You're the one who refused counseling. You're the one who's been pulling away. Oh, save it. You want to play the victim now? You want to pretend you're some perfect husband? I want to know if there's anything left worth fighting for. My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay calm. Is it serious with him? Do you love him? That's when her facade finally cracked completely. Yes, she hissed. Yes, I love him. He actually sees me, appreciates what I've accomplished. He doesn't make me feel like I'm settling for some suburban mediocrity. The words hit harder than I expected. I had been prepared for the affair, but not for the depth of her contempt for our life together. What about the boys? What about Jake and Tommy? Don't use the children to manipulate me. This is about us, Michael. About how we've grown apart. No, Sarah. This is about you having an affair and lying to me for months. But if you want to end it with Marcus and work on us, end it? Her voice rose dangerously. You think you can just demand that I end it? Like you have some right to control my life? I have a right to expect fidelity in our marriage. That's when she grabbed the ceramic vase from the counter, the one her mother had given us for our 10th anniversary. In one fluid motion, she hurled it at my head. I ducked instinctively, but not fast enough. The edge caught my temple, and I felt warm blood immediately begin trickling down my face. The vase exploded against the wall behind me, ceramic fragments scattering across the kitchen floor like tiny daggers. The sound was deafening in our quiet house. Daddy, Jake's small voice came from the hallway. I turned to see him peeking around the corner, his 8-year-old eyes wide with terror. He was still in his pajamas, probably awakened by our raised voices. Sarah and I both froze. The sight of our son witnessing this moment, his mother's violence, his father bleeding, created a silence more powerful than any argument. Go back to bed, buddy, I said gently, touching the cut on my head. Everything's okay, but everything wasn't okay, and Jake was old enough to know it. He disappeared back down the hallway, but I could hear his footsteps on the stairs, likely running to check on Tommy. Sarah stared at the blood on my face, at the ceramic shards around our feet, at the space where our son had been standing. For a moment, I thought I saw regret in her eyes. Michael, don't. I grabbed a kitchen towel and pressed it to my temple. Just don't. As I stood there in our destroyed kitchen, watching my wife of 15 years struggle to find words that might excuse what had just happened, I realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about the affair anymore. This was about safety. Mine and my children's. The ceramic fragments scattered across our kitchen floor weren't just pieces of a broken vase. They were pieces of our broken marriage. And some things, once shattered, can never be put back together. After Sarah stormed upstairs and slammed our bedroom door, I sat in the kitchen cleaning blood from my temple and staring at the business card I'd found tucked behind her phone case. Marcus Chen, Senior Account Director, Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. The same card she'd shown me 6 months ago when talking about a new colleague who'd joined her team. I remembered meeting Marcus at Sarah's company holiday party last December. He was charming, articulate, and about my age, with an easy confidence that filled every room he entered. Sarah had introduced him as her new partner on the Morrison Industries account, their biggest client. Michael's a software engineer, she'd said, and I caught something in her tone I couldn't quite place then. It wasn't pride in my profession, but rather an apologetic explanation, as if my career needed justification in the presence of Marcus's marketing expertise. Marcus had been gracious, asking thoughtful questions about my work and even suggesting we grab drinks sometime to discuss some app ideas he'd been considering. I'd actually liked him, which made the betrayal cut deeper now. Sitting there with his business card, I started connecting dots I'd been too trusting to see before. The Morrison Industries account that required so many evening strategy sessions. The weekend conference in Milwaukee that turned into 2 conferences. The new wardrobe Sarah had invested in, claiming she needed to elevate her professional image for high-stakes client meetings. 3 months ago, Sarah had started going to a gym downtown instead of our local fitness center. Better equipment, she'd explained. And it's right near the office. Now I realized it was probably near Marcus's apartment, providing convenient cover for their meetings. The late-night phone calls she'd started taking in her car, claiming they were with West Coast clients in different time zones. The sudden interest in weekend work events I wasn't invited to. The way she'd started picking fights about small domestic issues, creating distance that justified her emotional withdrawal. I thought about the morning 2 weeks ago when I'd noticed she was wearing a new perfume. When I complimented her on it, she'd snapped that she'd been wearing it for months and it was typical of me not to notice. At the time, I'd felt guilty for being inattentive. Now I understood it was guilt that made her defensive. The most painful realization was how she'd used our children as alibis, taking Jake to soccer practice early for extra drills with coach. Martinez, Tommy has a play date. That might run late. Our boys' schedules had become convenient cover stories for stolen hours with Marcus. I remembered the Saturday last month when she'd claimed Tommy was invited to a birthday party I'd never heard about. She'd been gone for 4 hours, returning with elaborate details about the party games and how much cake Tommy had eaten. Our 5-year-old, when I asked him about it later, had looked confused and said he'd spent the afternoon with Grandma Sarah while Mommy had work stuff. Even her mother had been unknowingly complicit, babysitting while thinking she was supporting Sarah's career advancement. The layers of deception were staggering, but what haunted me most was the timeline. If Marcus had joined her company 6 months ago, and they'd been having an affair for what seemed like at least 3 months based on the evidence, then Sarah had been living this double life during some of our family's most important moments. Tommy's 5th birthday party, Jake's first Little League home run, our last family vacation to Wisconsin Dells, where she'd seemed distracted and irritable the entire time. She'd been comparing our family life to whatever fantasy she was building with Marcus, and we'd been found lacking. The business card in my hand represented more than an affair. It represented the systematic dismantling of everything I'd thought we were building together. The next morning, while Sarah showered and prepared for work, as if nothing had happened, I found myself in my home office staring at a journal I'd started keeping 8 months ago. My therapist, Dr. Patricia Hendricks, had suggested I document my thoughts and feelings about our marriage struggles. Sarah had mocked the idea relentlessly. "You're going to write in a diary like a teenage girl." She'd laughed when I mentioned starting therapy. "Michael, you're 38 years old. Maybe focus that energy on actually improving instead of just talking about your feelings." I'd gone anyway, paying for sessions out of my personal account to avoid her criticism. Dr. Hendricks had helped me recognize patterns I'd been too close to see, and my journal entries painted a disturbing picture of gradual manipulation and control. March 15th. Sarah criticized my handling of Jake's parent-teacher conference again, says I'm too soft and don't advocate properly for our son's needs. But when I tried to be more assertive with his teacher about the reading program, she said I was being aggressive and embarrassing her. April 2nd, suggested we plan a date night. Sarah said she's too busy with the Morrison account to think about trivial relationship maintenance. When I pointed out we haven't had alone time in 6 weeks, she accused me of being needy and not supporting her career goals. April 20th. Sarah made a unilateral decision to enroll Tommy in expensive private soccer lessons without discussing it with me. When I questioned the cost, she said I was being controlling about money and that she makes more than me anyway, so she should have more say in how we spend. The financial control had been subtle but persistent. Despite earning similar salaries, Sarah had gradually taken over all major financial decisions. She convinced me it made sense since she was better with money and had an MBA. But reading my journal entries, I could see how she'd used financial leverage to diminish my voice in our partnership. May 8th. Tried to discuss our household division of labor. I'm handling 80% of childcare and housework while she works late most nights. When I suggested we needed better balance, she said my job is more flexible and that she can't jeopardize important client relationships for domestic issues. The domestic labor imbalance had crept up gradually. Sarah's career demands had grown, and I'd willingly picked up slack because I wanted to support her success. But somehow, temporary adjustments had become permanent expectations. I'd become the default parent while Sarah positioned herself as the breadwinner whose career took priority. June 3rd. Sarah dismissed my concerns about Jake's anxiety again, says I'm overprotective and making him soft. But I see how he tenses up when she raises her voice, how he comes to me for comfort when she's stressed. Asked if we could discuss consistent parenting approaches. She said I'm undermining her authority. Reading about our parenting conflicts was especially painful. Sarah had strong opinions about raising resilient children, which often meant being critical of their emotional needs. She'd mock my gentler approach as creating mama's boys, even though the boys clearly sought comfort from me when upset. July 18th. Suggested marriage counseling again. Sarah's response was to laugh and say that if I need a therapist to figure out how to be a better husband, maybe the problem isn't our marriage. Said successful couples don't need outside help to solve their problems. Her resistance to counseling had been absolute. She'd positioned seeking help as a sign of weakness or failure, even as our relationship deteriorated. Any suggestion that we needed professional guidance was met with ridicule or accusations that I was creating problems where none existed. August 25th. Sarah exploded at me for embarrassing her at the neighborhood barbecue by disagreeing with her political opinion. Says I need to learn when to keep my mouth shut in public, but she'd been wrong about the local school funding issue, and I'd only offered factual correction. The silence treatment lasted 3 days. The journal revealed a pattern of public humiliation disguised as maintaining social harmony. Sarah expected me to be a supportive prop for her public image, while having no voice of my own. Disagreeing with her, even respectfully and privately, resulted in punishment through emotional withdrawal. Looking back through months of entries, I could see how my own confidence had eroded. Early entries showed frustration and confusion. Later ones revealed self-doubt and acceptance of blame for problems I hadn't created. I'd internalized her criticisms and started questioning my own perceptions. The woman I'd fallen in love with in college had slowly transformed our marriage into a hierarchy where her needs, opinions, and career always took precedence. I'd enabled it by being accommodating, by valuing harmony over equity, by assuming her behavior came from stress rather than character. Now, with ceramic shards still scattered across our kitchen floor and Marcus's business card as evidence of her ultimate betrayal, I could finally see our marriage clearly. The affair wasn't an aberration. It was the logical conclusion of years of selfishness and emotional manipulation. That afternoon, while Sarah was at work and presumably with Marcus, I sat down with Jake and Tommy for what I thought would be a simple conversation about the previous night's argument. What I discovered shattered any remaining illusions about our family's stability. "Daddy, why was Mommy so mad?" Tommy asked, his 5-year-old voice small and uncertain. He was coloring at the kitchen table while I prepared their after-school snack, his little hands working carefully to stay within the lines. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree, buddy, but it's never okay to throw things when we're upset." Jake, sitting across from his brother with homework spread before him, looked up sharply. "She throws things a lot when you're not here." My hand froze over the apple I was slicing. "What do you mean, Jake?" "Last week she threw her coffee mug at the wall because Tommy spilled juice. And she pushed the chair really hard when you were working late Tuesday." I set down the knife and sat beside them, trying to keep my voice calm. "Can you tell me more about that?" Tommy held up his drawing, a crayon picture of our family. But the figure labeled Mommy had angry red scribbles around her head and what looked like lightning bolts coming from her hands. "That's angry Mommy," Tommy explained matter-of-factly. "She gets the angry face when we're too loud or when Daddy asks her questions." Jake nodded seriously. "We have to be really quiet when she's on the phone with work people. If we interrupt, she gets really mad. Remember when Tommy had that nightmare and went to her room? She yelled at him for bothering her during an important call." "When was this?" I asked, my chest tightening. 2 weeks ago, Jake said. "Tommy was crying about monsters, but Mummy said he was being a baby and sent him back to bed. I let him sleep with me instead. I looked at my 8-year-old son taking care of his little brother because their mother couldn't be bothered with a scared child's nightmare." The picture Tommy had drawn wasn't just childhood art. It was a trauma response, his way of processing living with someone whose anger had become unpredictable and frightening. "Daddy, are you and Mommy getting divorced?" Jake asked quietly. His question was so direct, so adult, that I realized he'd been thinking about this possibility for a while. "Why would you ask that, buddy?" "Because Sarah's mom and dad got divorced when she was in 2nd grade, and her mom threw things too. Sarah told me about it when I asked why Grandma Susan doesn't talk to Grandpa Mark anymore." The casual way Jake referred to his friend's family trauma, connecting it to our situation, made me realize how normalized dysfunction had become in our house. My children were already developing coping strategies for their mother's emotional volatility. "Has Mommy ever hurt you or Tommy? Pushed you or hit you?" Jake shook his head quickly. "No, but she grabs really hard sometimes when we're not listening fast enough. And she yanked Tommy's arm pretty hard last month when he wouldn't put his shoes on." Tommy nodded, touching his upper arm unconsciously. "It made a purple mark, but Mommy said it was my fault for not obeying." I felt sick. My wife had been physically aggressive with our children, and I'd been oblivious. The purple mark Tommy mentioned, I remembered him saying he'd bumped into his bedroom door. Sarah had coached him to lie about it. "Boys, I need you to know that it's never okay for anyone to hurt you, even when they're angry. And it's not your fault when grown-ups lose control of their emotions." Over the next hour, more details emerged. Sarah's patience with the children had deteriorated significantly over the past few months. She'd been increasingly critical of their normal childhood behavior, expecting them to be quiet and compliant beyond their developmental capacity. Jake admitted he'd started doing extra chores without being asked, hoping to prevent his mother's anger. Tommy had regressed in his potty training, having accidents when Sarah was home, but not when I was caring for him alone. Both boys had developed a hyper-vigilant awareness of their mother's moods, adjusting their behavior to avoid triggering her frustration. "We try to be good," Jake said earnestly, "but sometimes Mummy gets mad anyway, and we don't know why." That evening, after the boys were asleep, I stood in Tommy's doorway watching him clutch his stuffed elephant, the same one from our Christmas photo. His sleep had become restless lately, and now I understood why. He was processing stress and fear that no 5-year-old should have to endure. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My children were not safe in their own home, not just from witnessing violence between their parents, but from becoming direct targets of their mother's increasing volatility. The affair had been a betrayal of our marriage, but Sarah's treatment of Jake and Tommy was a betrayal of parenthood itself. I'd spent months trying to save our marriage, but I'd failed to protect the two people who mattered most. My boys deserved better than walking on eggshells, better than managing an adult's emotions, better than learning that love came with conditions and punishments. Tommy's drawing of angry mommy wasn't just childhood art, it was evidence. Evidence that my children were already paying the price for my denial about who Sarah had become. The next morning, while Sarah was at the gym, or wherever she actually went during her supposed workout hours, I made a phone call that would change everything. David Martinez, a family law attorney my brother had recommended, agreed to see me that afternoon for an emergency consultation. I'd never imagined myself sitting in a lawyer's office discussing custody arrangements and domestic violence documentation. The legal pad in front of me filled with notes as David explained the realities I was facing. "Illinois follows the best interest of the child standard," David said, his voice professional but kind. "The court's primary concern is the children's safety and well-being. Physical violence toward a spouse, especially witnessed by children, is taken seriously. But what about emotional abuse? The way she treats them when I'm not around? More difficult to prove, but not impossible. Documentation is key. Has she ever left marks on the children?" I told him about Tommy's bruised arm, how Sarah had coached him to lie about it. David made notes, explaining that physical evidence was crucial but often disappeared quickly. "You need to start documenting everything," he said, sliding a packet across the desk. "Dates, times, witnesses, photographs if possible. Keep a detailed log of concerning behaviors. Record conversations if Illinois law permits," which it does, with one-party consent. The consultation notes I was taking felt surreal, like I was planning a military operation, rather than protecting my children from their own mother. But David's systematic approach gave me hope that there was a legal path forward. "Emergency custody orders are available in cases of immediate danger," he continued. "But judges don't grant them lightly. You'd need compelling evidence that the children face imminent harm." What constitutes imminent harm? Physical violence toward children, witness domestic violence, credible threats, evidence of severe emotional abuse. The fact that she threw an object at your head while your son was watching. That's significant. David explained that Illinois courts generally favored shared custody arrangements, but documented domestic violence could result in supervised visitation or restricted access for the abusive parent. The key was building an evidence file that painted a clear picture of the children's situation. "Document the children's behavioral changes," he advised. "Regression in development, sleep disturbances, anxiety symptoms, fear responses. Get them into counseling if possible. Therapists can be powerful witnesses if their observations support your concerns." I learned about protective orders, temporary restraining orders, and the complex process of emergency custody petitions. The legal system moved slowly, but there were provisions for situations where children's safety was at immediate risk. "Financial documentation is also crucial," David said. "Gather bank statements, credit card records, evidence of any hidden assets or unusual spending. Affairs often involve financial deception." He handed me a checklist of documents to collect: birth certificates, social security cards, passport information, school records, medical records, financial statements, property deeds, insurance policies. The list felt overwhelming, but each item represented a piece of evidence that could protect my sons. "Most importantly," David said, "don't confront your wife about consulting an attorney. Don't give her advance warning that you're considering leaving. Preparation is your advantage right now." The consultation fee was $400, money I'd have to explain carefully if Sarah noticed it missing from our account. David suggested I open a separate checking account in my name only, somewhere I could safely accumulate funds for legal fees and temporary housing. How long does this process usually take? I asked. Emergency custody can happen within days if the evidence supports it. Divorce proceedings typically take 6 months to 2 years, depending on cooperation levels and complexity. Given what you've described, I'd expect your wife to contest everything aggressively. Walking back to my car with David's business card and a folder full of legal information, I felt both terrified and empowered. The law provided tools to protect my children, but using those tools would require courage, planning, and careful documentation. That afternoon, I opened a new bank account at a different branch, depositing $2,000 from my personal savings. I bought a small digital recorder and a notebook specifically for documenting incidents. I researched child therapists who specialized in trauma and family transitions. For the first time since discovering Sarah's affair, I had a concrete plan, not to save my marriage, that was beyond repair, but to save my children from further harm. The consultation notes in my briefcase weren't just legal advice, they were a roadmap to freedom. 3 days later, Sarah discovered I'd been researching divorce attorneys. I'd been careful, using private browsing and clearing my search history, but I'd underestimated her surveillance of our shared computer. David Martinez Family Law, she said, standing in our bedroom doorway holding a printed email confirmation from his office. Her voice was dangerously calm. Emergency custody consultation. Domestic violence documentation. My blood went cold. I'd forgotten about the automatic email receipt that had gone to our shared account. The one we used for household bills and family communications. Sarah, we need to talk about what, Michael? Talk about how you're planning to destroy our family. How you're going to try to take my children away from me. I'm trying to protect them. After what happened the other night. What happened was a momentary lapse in judgment during an emotional conversation. But this, she waved the printed email, this is calculated. You're building a case against me. I'd never seen her this angry. And the controlled nature of her fury was more frightening than her explosive outburst with the vase. This was strategic rage, and I realized how dangerous that made her. You've been documenting incidents, haven't you? She continued, recording conversations probably, taking notes about every argument, every moment of normal parental frustration. Normal parents don't throw objects at their spouse's head. And normal husbands don't secretly plan to divorce their wives while pretending everything is fine. She moved closer, and I instinctively took a step back. You have no idea what you're doing, Michael. You think some family court judge is going to give you custody because I threw one thing during a fight. You think they're going to believe your victim narrative. It's not a narrative, Sarah. It's documentation of what's actually happening in this house. Her laugh was harsh. What's happening is that you discovered your wife is having an affair and decided to play the wounded hero instead of taking responsibility for your role in our marriage falling apart. My role? I'm the one who earns more money, has better connections in this community, and knows how to present herself professionally. You're a software developer who works from home in sweatpants and thinks taking kids to soccer practice makes you father of the year. The calculated cruelty in her voice was something I'd never experienced before. This wasn't angry Sarah or frustrated Sarah. This was Sarah revealing who she really was beneath the mask. You want to play custody games? I'll destroy you, Michael. I'll make sure every judge, every social worker, every person involved in this process knows exactly what kind of man you really are. What are you talking about? The drinking problem you've been hiding, the anger management issues, the way you've been emotionally absent from this family for years, the inappropriate relationship you've been having with that woman from your work. My mouth fell open. Sarah, none of that is true, and you know it. Truth is relative in family court. What matters is who tells the story more convincingly. She walked to our bathroom and, without warning, punched the hollow core door with her fist. The impact left a hole the size of a tennis ball, splintered wood around the edges like a spider web of destruction. Oops, she said, examining her scraped knuckles. I guess I'll have to tell people you did that during one of your violent outbursts, the premeditated nature of it. The way she damaged the door and immediately created a false narrative made me understand how completely I'd underestimated her capacity for manipulation. You're going to withdraw that consultation, Michael. You're going to stop this divorce nonsense and figure out how to be a better husband. Because if you don't, I will make your life a living hell. And if I do stay, what then? You keep seeing Marcus while I pretend everything is fine. Marcus is none of your business anymore. You forfeited the right to make demands when you decided to lawyer up instead of working on our marriage. She moved to our closet and began pulling out clothes, throwing them onto the bed with violent efficiency. Where are you going? Away from you. I need space to think about whether this marriage is worth saving. You've poisoned our home with your paranoia and legal threats. What about the boys? What about them? You're so concerned about their welfare, you figure it out. Maybe some time as a single parent will help you appreciate what I've been dealing with. She stuffed clothes into a suitcase, her movements sharp and aggressive. I'll be staying with my sister for a few days. Don't contact me unless there's an emergency with the children. Sarah, please. We can work through this without involving lawyers. Too late for that, Michael. You made your choice when you decided I was the enemy instead of your partner. After she left, I stood in our bedroom looking at the hole punched in the bathroom door. The jagged edges and splintered wood weren't just property damage. They were a promise, a preview of the destruction Sarah was capable of when she felt cornered. I took photos of the door from multiple angles, documenting the fresh damage. Then I called David Martinez's office and scheduled an emergency follow-up appointment. Sarah's escalation had just provided me with exactly the kind of evidence he'd said I would need. The hole in the bathroom door wasn't just an act of violence, it was Sarah's declaration of war. With Sarah staying at her sister's house, I had a brief window to prepare for what I now understood was inevitable. The emergency bag I assembled that night felt like a lifeline, a concrete plan in a situation that had spiraled beyond my control. My hands shook as I gathered essentials in a large duffel bag, trying to think like someone fleeing danger rather than just leaving for a weekend trip. Birth certificates for all of us, social security cards, copies of our passports, the boys' favorite comfort items, Tommy's stuffed elephant, Jake's special blanket he still slept with, a change of clothes for each of us, basic toiletries, any medications. Financial documents came next. I'd already opened the separate account, but I needed cash and important papers. Bank statements, insurance policies, our mortgage information, tax returns from the past 3 years. I photographed everything with my phone before hiding the originals in the emergency bag. My brother Kevin had offered his guest room when I'd called earlier. Stay as long as you need, he'd said without hesitation. Linda's already setting up the room, and she's excited to help with the boys. Having somewhere safe to go made the plan feel possible rather than desperate. I created copies of my documentation file, photos of the vase fragments, pictures of the bathroom door damage, my therapy journal entries, the consultation notes from David Martinez. One copy went in the emergency bag, another in my car, a third uploaded to a secure cloud storage account Sarah couldn't access. The boys' school records and medical information went into a folder along with contact numbers for their teachers, doctors, and friends' parents. If we had to leave quickly, I wanted to maintain as much stability as possible for their routines and relationships. Choosing what to pack for the children was heartbreaking. Their entire lives were in this house. Toys, books, art projects, the baseball trophies Jake had earned, the superhero figurines Tommy played with every day. I could only take essentials and a few special items, knowing they might not see the rest for weeks or months. I researched the legal process for emergency custody one more time, making sure I understood the timeline and requirements. David had been clear. Once I filed, there would be no going back. Sarah would know immediately, and her retaliation would be swift and comprehensive. The practical considerations felt overwhelming. How do you dissolve a 15-year marriage and relocate 2 children with less than 48 hours of preparation? I made lists of people to notify. My boss, the boys' schools, our pediatrician, close friends who might wonder why we suddenly disappeared. I practiced the conversation I'd need to have with Jake and Tommy. How do you explain to an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old that their family is breaking apart, but in a way that doesn't terrify them or make them blame themselves? I rehearsed words about keeping them safe, about how much I loved them, about how none of this was their fault. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Don't think I don't know what you're planning. You'll regret trying to turn my children against me. The threat was clear. She was monitoring my activities somehow, possibly tracking my location or accessing our shared accounts. I turned off location services and changed passwords on my personal accounts, realizing how exposed I'd been. That night, I hid the emergency bag in my car trunk, covering it with winter coats and jumper cables so it looked like normal car supplies. Every father should have an emergency kit, I told myself, trying to normalize what felt like planning an escape from prison. I couldn't sleep. Lying in our bed, knowing it might be one of the last nights in the house where my children had grown up. The room felt haunted by 15 years of shared history. Some beautiful, some terrible, all of it about to become the past. The emergency bag in my car wasn't just survival supplies. It was hope. Hope that I could protect my children. Hope that we could build something better away from Sarah's volatility. Hope that love didn't have to include fear. Sarah returned home the next evening while I was helping the boys with their homework at the kitchen table. The atmosphere immediately shifted. Jake tensed up, and Tommy instinctively moved closer to me. Even they could sense the dangerous energy she brought into the room. "Boys, go to your rooms," she said without preamble. "Daddy and I need to talk. Can we finish our math homework first?" Jake asked politely. "Now." Sarah's voice cut through the air like a blade. I squeezed Jake's shoulder gently. "It's okay, buddy. Take Tommy upstairs and I'll check your work later." They gathered their papers and pencils, and I watched them climb the stairs with the careful, quiet movements of children who'd learned not to draw attention during adult conflicts. Sarah waited until their bedroom doors closed before turning to me. "I've been thinking about our situation, and you have a choice to make, Michael. You can continue this destructive path you're on. The lawyers, the documentation, the paranoid fantasy that I'm some kind of threat to our children. Or you can be a man and fix what's broken in our marriage. What about Marcus? What about him? You're so focused on my relationship with Marcus that you can't see the real problem. The real problem is that you've checked out of our marriage emotionally and physically for years. Sarah, that's not true and you know it. Do I? When's the last time you initiated intimacy? When's the last time you planned a romantic evening or showed any interest in me as a woman rather than just the mother of your children?" I stared at her, amazed by her ability to rewrite history. "You've been having an affair for months. You've been lying to me, using our children as alibis, creating elaborate cover stories. I found connection with someone who appreciates me, but that doesn't mean our marriage has to end if you're willing to fight for it. Fight for it. You threw a vase at my head in front of our son." Her expression hardened. "That was an emotional reaction to discovering my husband was spying on me and planning to destroy our family. Any reasonable person would have been upset." The way she minimized the violence, turned it into a justified response to my betrayal, made my skin crawl. But I tried one more time to reach the woman I'd once loved. "Sarah, I know we've had problems. I know I haven't been perfect, but we can't build anything real on the foundation of your affair with Marcus." "Fine," she said coldly. "If that's how you want to play this." She walked to the living room and picked up one of Tommy's toy trucks from the floor. Without warning, she hurled it at the wall with tremendous force. The metal truck left a dent in the drywall and clattered to the floor, pieces of plastic breaking off. "Daddy's having angry episodes again," she called loudly toward the stairs, making sure the boys could hear. Throwing toys and damaging the house, I stood frozen, watching her create a false narrative in real time. "Stop it, Sarah. The boys know you threw that." She picked up Jake's soccer ball and bounced it hard against the coffee table, knocking over a picture frame and a coffee mug. "Michael, you need to control your temper. You're scaring the children." "What are you doing?" "I'm showing you how easy it is to create a story, how easy it would be to convince a family court judge that you're the volatile one, the one who damages property and frightens our children." I heard footsteps upstairs, Jake and Tommy moving around, probably scared by the sounds of objects being thrown. Sarah heard them too and raised her voice again. "Please don't hit me again, Michael. I'll call the police if you don't calm down." The calculated nature of her performance was terrifying. She was creating audio evidence for our children to hear, crafting a narrative where I was the aggressor and she was the victim. "Sarah, stop. You're traumatizing them. I'm protecting them from seeing their father's violent behavior. Boys, stay in your rooms until Daddy calms down." I realized this was planned. She'd returned home with a strategy to discredit me, to create confusion about who was actually violent in our household. If the boys heard her saying I was hitting her, if they saw damaged property and believed I'd caused it, her version of events would be supported by their testimony. But then Jake appeared at the top of the stairs. "Mummy, why are you throwing things and saying Daddy did it?" Sarah's performance faltered for just a moment. "Go back to your room, Jake." "But I saw you throw Tommy's truck. Daddy was just standing there." "You're confused, sweetheart. Sometimes when grown-ups fight, it's hard to remember what really happened." "I'm not confused," Jake said with 8-year-old clarity. "You threw the truck and the ball. You always throw things when you're mad." Sarah's mask slipped completely. "Get back to your room right now, Jake, or you'll be grounded for a week." I saw my son's face crumple as he realized his mother was angry at him for telling the truth. That was the moment I knew we had to leave. Not tomorrow, not next week, but tonight. I'm calling the police, I said quietly, pulling out my phone. Go ahead, Sarah said. Tell them how your husband is having a violent episode and threatening you. Tell them how he's been psychologically abusing you and the children. But I was already dialing 911, and the dispatch recording would capture everything Sarah was saying, including her admission that she was planning to lie to the police about domestic violence. The report number the officer gave me an hour later, case 2023 DV 847293, wasn't just documentation. It was evidence that Sarah's violence had escalated to the point where law enforcement intervention was necessary. Our breaking point had arrived, and there was no going back. After the police left, and Sarah retreated to our bedroom, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the picture frames in the hallway, I knew we couldn't stay another night. The boys had witnessed their mother's calculated deception, seen her try to gaslight them about what they'd observed with their own eyes. The psychological damage was happening in real time. I found Jake and Tommy huddled together in Jake's room, still shaken by the evening's events. Tommy was crying quietly while Jake tried to comfort him. Their roles reversed in a way that broke my heart. Hey guys, I said softly, sitting on the edge of Jake's bed. We need to talk. Are we in trouble for what Mommy said? Tommy asked, his 5-year-old voice trembling. No, buddy, you're not in trouble for anything, but I need you both to listen carefully, okay? I took a deep breath, knowing that what I said next would change their lives forever. We're going to go stay with Uncle Kevin and Aunt Linda for a while, tonight. Why? Jake asked, though his expression suggested he already understood more than he should have to. Because Mommy is having some big feelings that are making it hard for her to be safe with her family right now. And my job is to keep you both safe, no matter what. Is Mommy sick? Tommy asked. In a way, yes. Sometimes grown-ups need help learning how to handle their feelings without hurting other people. But that's not your job to fix, okay? Your job is just to be kids. Jake looked at me seriously. She was lying about you throwing things, wasn't she? Yes, she was. And that's not okay. It's never okay to lie about someone, especially to police officers. Will we see her again? Tommy's question was so small, so uncertain. Of course you will. Mommy loves you very much, even when she makes poor choices. But for now, we need to be somewhere peaceful while the grown-ups figure out how to make things better. I helped them pack their favorite things, the items I hadn't already put in the emergency bag. Jake carefully chose his baseball cards and the book series he was reading. Tommy couldn't decide between 3 stuffed animals, so I told him we could take them all. What about school? Jake asked practically. You'll keep going to the same school. Uncle Kevin's house isn't far, and I'll drive you every morning just like always. As we gathered their belongings, I found myself memorizing details of their rooms, the glow-in-the-dark stars on Tommy's ceiling, the soccer posters covering Jake's walls, the height marks I'd penciled on their doorframes to track their growth. These rooms had held their entire childhoods, and I didn't know when they'd see them again. The hardest part was leaving family photos and memories behind. Years of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations, all of it would stay. With Sarah while we started over with nothing but what fit in a few bags. I loaded our belongings into the car while the boys waited in the garage, away from any potential confrontation with their mother. The emergency bag I'd hidden days earlier now felt prophetic rather than paranoid. Where are we going to put our stuff at Uncle Kevin's? Tommy asked as I buckled him into his car seat. They have a guest room with bunk beds. Jake, you can have the top bunk if you want. Can Tommy sleep in my room if he gets scared? Of course. We're going to take care of each other, okay? As I backed out of our driveway, I caught a glimpse of Sarah watching us from our bedroom window. Her silhouette was motionless, and I couldn't read her expression from that distance. Part of me hoped she felt regret, that seeing her children leave might shock her into recognizing what her behavior had cost our family. But mostly, I felt relief. Relief that we were moving towards safety, that my children wouldn't spend another night walking on eggshells, that I'd finally chosen their well-being over my own desire to preserve our family unit. Daddy, Tommy's voice from the back seat was sleepy, but curious. Is Uncle Kevin's house going to be our new home? For now, buddy, we're going to figure out what comes next one day at a time. Jake was quiet during the 20-minute drive, looking out the window at the familiar neighborhoods we were leaving behind. As we pulled into Kevin's driveway, he finally spoke. I'm glad we left, Dad. I was getting tired of being scared all the time. His honesty hit me like a physical blow. My 8-year-old son had been living in fear, and I'd been so focused on trying to fix my marriage that I'd failed to protect him from that daily anxiety. I left our house keys on the kitchen counter before we'd walked out, a symbolic surrender of the life we'd built and the dreams that had died there. Those keys represented 15 years of shared history, but they also represented a chapter that needed to end. As Kevin and Linda welcomed us into their home with hugs and reassurances, as they showed the boys the room they'd prepared and promised homemade pancakes for breakfast, I realized that walking away from our house wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something better. The first night at Kevin's house, neither of my boys slept well. Tommy crawled into the bottom bunk with Jake around midnight, and I found them both wide awake at 2 a.m., whispering about whether Mommy was okay by herself. She's probably sad that we left, Tommy said, his small voice carrying guilt no 5-year-old should have to bear. That's not your responsibility, buddy, I whispered, sitting on the edge of their bed. Grown-ups are responsible for their own feelings and choices, but explaining adult dysfunction to children who still believed in fairness and simple solutions felt impossible. How do you tell a child that sometimes love isn't enough, that sometimes protecting someone means leaving them? First thing Friday morning, I drove to David Martinez's office with the police report from the night before. The temporary restraining order I filed that afternoon felt like both protection and admission of failure, legal, acknowledgement that the woman I'd once promised to love and honor had become someone my children needed protection from. This is exactly what we needed, David said, reviewing the police report and the photos I'd taken of the property damage. Her attempt to create false evidence, recorded by the 911 dispatcher, undermines any credibility she might have had. The restraining order prohibited Sarah from contacting me or the children except through legal channels, from coming within 500 feet of Kevin's house, and from removing the boys from their school or activities. It was a legal bubble of safety, but bubbles could be popped. My phone had been buzzing constantly since we'd left the house. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 6 voicemails from Sarah. Her communications ran the gamut from pleading to threatening, from promising to change to vowing to destroy me in court. You can't keep my children from me forever, Michael. I'm their mother. I've hired the best family attorney in Chicago. You have no idea what you've started. Please call me. We can work this out without involving lawyers and courts. You're going to regret this. I'll make sure you never see those boys again. Each message violated the restraining order, providing more evidence for our case, but also demonstrating her inability to respect legal boundaries. David advised me to document everything but not respond. Kevin and Linda had been incredible, transforming their guest room into a temporary haven for 2 confused children. Linda stocked the refrigerator with the boys' favorite foods and found age-appropriate books about family changes. Kevin set up a gaming console in the basement and promised to teach Jake how to change oil in his car. This is what family does, Linda said, when I tried to thank her for the 100th time. You'd do the same for us. But underneath their kindness, I could see the strain. Having 3 additional people in their house, especially 2 children processing trauma, disrupted everyone's routine. Tommy had meltdowns over small changes. Different cereal for breakfast, unfamiliar bathroom soap, the way the guest room curtains filtered morning light. Jake tried to be helpful, making his bed without being asked and offering to set the table for dinner. But I caught him staring out windows, probably wondering if Sarah would appear, and flinching when phones rang unexpectedly. I called their school to explain the situation and ensure Sarah couldn't pick them up. The principal, Mrs. Patterson, was understanding but concerned. We'll need official documentation of the custody arrangement, she said. And Jake seems quite anxious this week. Has something happened at home? Everything had happened at home, but explaining it felt like betraying my children's privacy while simultaneously not providing enough context for their behavior. I researched child therapists, specializing in family transitions and divorce trauma, making appointments for both boys. Professional help felt crucial, but I worried about adding more disruption to their already upended lives. Friday evening, as I tucked them into their temporary beds, Tommy asked the question I'd been dreading. When are we going home, Daddy? This is our home for now, buddy. Uncle Kevin and Aunt Linda are taking really good care of us. But when can we see Mommy? Soon. There are some grown-up things that need to get figured out first. Jake, more perceptive at 8, understood the implications better. Are you and Mommy getting divorced? Yes, Jake, I'm sorry. I know that's scary and sad. Will we have to choose who to live with? My job is to make sure you're safe and happy. That's the most important thing to me. After they finally fell asleep, I sat in Kevin's kitchen with a cup of coffee and the temporary restraining order paperwork spread before me. Case number TRO 2023-4721 wasn't just legal protection, it was official recognition that my wife had become a threat to our children's well-being. The document felt both empowering and devastating. Empowering because it provided legal tools to protect my boys. Devastating because it represented the complete collapse of every dream I'd had for our family. But as I listened to my children sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, without the underlying tension that had become normal in our house, I knew the temporary restraining order was just the beginning of building something better. 2 weeks after filing for divorce, Sarah's counterpetition arrived like a declaration of war. Her attorney, Margaret Sterling, one of Chicago's most aggressive family lawyers, had crafted a document that turned reality completely upside down. According to Sarah's version of events, I was a controlling husband who'd isolated her from friends and career opportunities. She claimed I had anger management issues, citing the violent episode where I'd allegedly thrown objects and threatened her, the same incident where she'd actually thrown Tommy's truck and soccer ball while trying to frame me. But the most devastating allegation was about my relationship with Dr. Patricia Hendricks, my therapist. Sarah's petition suggested I'd been having an inappropriate emotional affair with my mental health provider, using our sessions to plot against our marriage rather than work on our problems. She's trying to weaponize your therapy, David explained as we reviewed the counter-petition in his office. It's a common tactic. Take something healthy you did for your marriage and twist it into evidence of betrayal. The custody petition, documents I held, painted me as an unfit father who'd kidnapped our children and was attempting to manipulate them against their mother. Sarah was requesting sole custody with supervised visitation for me, claiming the boys were traumatized by my erratic behavior. She's also claiming financial misconduct, David continued. Says you've been hiding assets and planning to leave her destitute. I stared at the legal documents, amazed by how thoroughly Sarah had inverted our reality. The separate bank account I'd opened for legal fees was characterized as secret financial planning. My documentation of her violence was described as obsessive, surveillance and psychological abuse. How can she lie this completely? There are police reports, recordings. Family court isn't about absolute truth, David said grimly. It's about competing narratives. And Sarah's attorney is very good at constructing believable alternative stories. The character witness list Sarah had assembled was impressive and strategic. Her sister would testify to my controlling behavior. Her mother would describe how I'd always been jealous of Sarah's success. Even Marcus, her affair partner, was listed as a witness to Sarah's professional achievements and my failure to support her career. Most painfully, Sarah had recruited our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who'd witnessed me arguing loudly with Sarah in our driveway 3 months ago. What Mrs. Chen hadn't seen was Sarah throwing garden tools at me during that argument, or the way she'd screamed accusations while I tried to de-escalate the situation. We need our own character witnesses, David said. People who've observed Sarah's behavior, who can speak to your parenting, who understand the real dynamics of your marriage. I thought about who might testify on my behalf. Kevin and Linda, obviously. My therapist, Dr. Hendricks, could explain the therapeutic goals I'd been working toward. The boys' pediatrician had documentation of Tommy's regression and Jake's anxiety symptoms that correlated with the timeline of Sarah's escalating behavior. What about the children? Will they have to testify? Possibly. Judges sometimes interview children in chambers to understand their preferences and experiences, but we'll try to protect them from that trauma if possible. The financial discovery process revealed another layer of Sarah's deception. She'd been moving money to accounts I didn't know existed, claiming it was for business expenses related to her work with Marcus. Credit card statements showed charges at expensive restaurants and hotels during times she'd claimed to be in client meetings. She's been funding the affair with marital assets, David explained. That works in our favor for property division, but it also shows premeditation and financial dishonesty. I learned that the legal process would take months, possibly over a year. Emergency custody hearings, temporary support calculations, discovery proceedings, mediation attempts, and potentially a full trial. Each phase would cost thousands of dollars and require me to relive the worst moments of our marriage in excruciating detail. The hardest part, David warned, is that Sarah will escalate her accusations as the process continues. Desperate people make desperate claims, and her attorney will encourage aggressive tactics to pressure you into an unfavorable settlement. He was right. Within days of receiving the custody petition, Sarah began a campaign of harassment that skirted the edges of the restraining order. She showed up at the boys' school during pickup time, claiming she had a right to see her children. She called Kevin's house repeatedly, hanging up when anyone answered. She sent flowers to my office with cards expressing how much she missed our family. Each incident required documentation, phone calls to my attorney, and amendments to our protective orders. The legal battle was consuming my life, taking time and emotional energy away from helping my children adjust to their new reality. But the most challenging aspect was explaining to Jake and Tommy why they couldn't see their mother while grown-up paperwork was being completed. They didn't understand why love had become so complicated, why their family had exploded into legal documents and court dates. I just want things to be normal again, Jake said one evening after a particularly difficult day at school where Sarah had attempted to approach him during recess. I know, buddy. We're working toward a new kind of normal, one where everyone feels safe and respected. The custody petition documents spread across Kevin's dining room table weren't just legal paperwork. They were the blueprint for rebuilding our lives. Every page represented a choice between the familiar dysfunction we'd left behind and the uncertain but hopeful future we were fighting to create. 3 weeks into our legal proceedings, Sarah launched a social media campaign that was as calculated as it was devastating. The screenshots I captured of her Facebook and Instagram posts painted her as a heartbroken mother whose children had been stolen by a vindictive husband. Praying for strength during this difficult time, read one post, accompanied by a photo of her looking tearful in our empty living room. When someone you love tries to destroy your family, all you can do is hold on to hope and fight for your children. The comments poured in from friends and acquaintances who knew nothing about the violence, the affair, or the months of escalating abuse. Stay strong, Sarah. Can't believe Michael would do this to you. Those boys need their mother. Another post showed a screenshot of a Mother's Day card Jake had made her 2 months earlier, before everything fell apart. Missing my babies tonight. No matter what lies are told about me, I will never stop fighting to be their mother. The manipulation was masterful. Sarah positioned herself as the abandoned victim while making subtle accusations about my character without saying anything legally actionable. She was building public sympathy while potentially influencing people who might be called as witnesses or who knew families in our community. Her sister Jessica shared the posts, adding her own commentary. My heart breaks for Sarah. She's the most devoted mother I know. And watching her be separated from Jake and Tommy is devastating. Some people will do anything to hurt the ones they claim to love. Even Sarah's mother joined the campaign, posting old family photos with captions like, "Remembering happier times when our family was whole. Praying justice prevails, and these precious boys are returned to their loving mother." The narrative Sarah was creating had a powerful emotional appeal. Single mother torn from her children by angry ex-husband. Devoted parent fighting the system to regain custody. It was a story that resonated with people's fears about family courts and parental rights. What her social media followers didn't see were the voicemails she left for me in violation of the restraining order, or the way she tried to manipulate the boys during her supervised visit the week before. "Did Daddy tell you bad things about Mommy?" she'd asked Tommy during their court-ordered meeting at the Family Services Center. "No," Tommy had answered honestly. "Daddy says you're sick and need help feeling better." "Daddy's confused, sweetheart. Mommy's not sick. Mommy just misses you so much that it makes her heart hurt." The supervisor had noted Sarah's attempts to undermine my explanations and coach the children's responses. But those official observations wouldn't reach Sarah's Facebook audience, who only saw her carefully curated version of events. I struggled with how to respond. David advised against engaging with her social media campaign directly, warning that anything I posted could be used against me in court. "Don't give her ammunition," he said. "Let your actions speak louder than her words." But watching friends and neighbors form opinions based on Sarah's manipulation was excruciating. People I'd known for years began looking at me differently at the grocery store or the gas station. Some avoided eye contact entirely, clearly uncomfortable with their assumptions about my character. The worst part was how Sarah's campaign affected the boys. Jake came home from school one day upset because his friend Connor's mother had asked him if he missed living with his mum. "I told her we left because Mommy was throwing things and scaring us," Jake said. But she looked at me like she didn't believe me. The social media posts weren't just about public relations. They were part of Sarah's larger strategy to isolate us and control the narrative. By positioning herself as the victim, she was making it harder for people to believe the truth about her behavior. I finally understood that Sarah's public manipulation was just an extension of the private manipulation she'd used throughout our marriage. The same tactics that had made me question my own perceptions were now being deployed on a larger scale, designed to make our entire community doubt my motives and my fitness as a father. But what Sarah hadn't anticipated was that truth has a way of surfacing, especially when documented carefully and consistently. The screenshot evidence of her social media campaign would become part of our legal file, demonstrating her pattern of manipulation and her willingness to use public sympathy as a weapon against her own children's well-being. Her Facebook posts weren't just seeking support, they were revealing her character to anyone paying close attention. 6 weeks into our stay at Kevin's house, Jake drew his first picture of their temporary living situation. Instead of the angry red scribbles that had characterized Tommy's earlier drawings of Mommy, Jake's artwork showed a peaceful house with everyone smiling. Uncle Kevin was teaching him to use tools in the garage. Aunt Linda was baking cookies, and Tommy was playing with their dog Rusty in the backyard. "This is our safe house," Jake explained, adding careful details to each figure. "Nobody yells here and nobody throws things." The transformation in both boys had been gradual but undeniable. Tommy's nightmares decreased from nightly occurrences to occasional bad dreams. His appetite returned and he'd stopped having accidents. Jake's hypervigilance, the way he'd constantly monitor adult moods and adjust his behavior accordingly, began to fade as he realized that Kevin and Linda's emotions were stable and predictable. Dr. Sarah Chen, the child psychologist I'd found who specialized in family trauma, met with both boys weekly. Her observations supported what I was seeing at home. Children who were slowly rediscovering their natural resilience and joy. Trauma responses in children often manifest as regression, anxiety, and hypervigilance, Dr. Chen explained during one of our parent consultations. But children are remarkably adaptable when provided with consistent safety and emotional support. Jake had started sleeping through the night without checking on Tommy every few hours. He'd begun laughing at Kevin's terrible dad jokes and asking questions about how car engines worked. The 8-year-old who'd been managing his mother's emotions and protecting his little brother was gradually returning to age-appropriate concerns like whether he'd make the travel soccer team. Tommy's progress was even more dramatic. The 5-year-old who'd drawn pictures of angry Mommy with lightning bolts was now creating elaborate crayon masterpieces of dinosaurs and spaceships. His stutter, which had developed during the most stressful months at home, completely disappeared within 3 weeks of our move. "Uncle Kevin," Tommy announced one morning over breakfast, "you're the best grown-up because you never get the scary mad face." Kevin looked at me over Tommy's head, and I saw understanding in his eyes. My brother was witnessing firsthand what constant stress had done to my children, and how quickly they flourished in an environment of predictable kindness. The routine we'd established was simple but healing. Breakfast together every morning, with Kevin making silly voices while reading cereal box comics. School drop-offs that didn't involve anxiety about what mood Mum might be in when they returned. Homework time at the kitchen table without the underlying tension of adult conflict. Evenings had become something to look forward to, rather than endure. Linda taught the boys to cook simple meals, letting them measure ingredients and stir pots while sharing stories about their family traditions. Kevin set up a workshop area in the garage where Jake could learn to use basic tools safely, building birdhouses and simple projects that gave him confidence and pride. I was healing too, though more slowly. The hypervigilance I'd developed, constantly monitoring Sarah's moods, anticipating her reactions, managing household stress to prevent her outbursts, began to fade. I found myself laughing genuinely for the first time in months. Not the careful diplomatic laughter I'd used to diffuse tension at home. My own therapy sessions with Dr. Hendricks helped me understand how gradually I'd normalized Sarah's behavior. Abuse often escalates so slowly that victims adjust their baseline for what's acceptable, she explained. Living in constant crisis mode becomes the new normal, and you forget what peace actually feels like. The boys' bedtime routine had transformed from a stressful negotiation into a peaceful wind-down. Stories, gentle conversations about their day, prayers or quiet reflection time, all without the underlying fear that raised voices might disturb an irritable parent in the next room. "Daddy," Tommy said one night as I tucked him into the bottom bunk, "I like it here because nobody gets mad when I talk." His simple observation broke my heart and filled it simultaneously. My 5-year-old had learned to suppress his natural chattiness to avoid triggering his mother's impatience. Now, surrounded by adults who delighted in his questions and observations, he was rediscovering his voice. Jake's first drawing of their new home wasn't just childhood art. It was evidence of healing. The careful details he'd added, flowers in the garden, a basketball hoop Kevin had installed, even Rusty the dog wearing a smile, showed a child who was learning to trust that good things could be permanent. "Is this going to be our forever house?" Jake asked as he added final touches to his drawing. "Maybe not forever," I said honestly. "But it's our house for as long as we need it to be safe and happy." "Good," he said, signing his name in careful second-grade cursive at the bottom of the page. "I want to remember what it feels like when nobody's scared." His artwork captured something I was just beginning to understand myself. What our family could become when fear was no longer the foundation of our daily existence. The final custody hearing took place on a grey Thursday morning in October, 3 months after we'd left our family home. Judge Patricia Morales had reviewed hundreds of pages of documentation, police reports, therapy notes, and witness statements. Now she would decide our family's future based on evidence rather than emotion. Sarah arrived at court perfectly dressed and composed, flanked by her attorney, Margaret Sterling. She'd clearly prepared for this moment, understanding that her performance today would determine her access to Jake and Tommy. But the months of legal proceedings had taken their toll. I could see the strain beneath her. Carefully applied makeup, David, had prepared me for every possible outcome. But sitting in that courtroom while strangers debated my children's welfare felt surreal. The final custody agreement we were waiting to hear would legally define our family structure for years to come. "Your Honor," Margaret Sterling began, "my client has been unjustly separated from her children based on a single incident that was taken completely out of context. Sarah Thompson is a devoted mother whose only crime was having an emotional reaction to discovering her husband's plan to destroy their family. But Judge Morales had read the case file thoroughly. Mrs. Sterling, the evidence shows a pattern of escalating violence and manipulation, not a single incident. Your client threw objects at her spouse in front of their 8-year-old child, attempted to create false evidence by throwing additional objects and claiming her husband was responsible, and violated multiple restraining orders through continued harassment. The judge's attention turned to the documented evidence David had carefully assembled. Police reports with recorded audio of Sarah's attempt to frame me, photos of property damage, medical records documenting Tommy's regression and Jake's anxiety symptoms, therapy notes showing the children's improvement once removed from the volatile environment. "The court is particularly concerned," Judge Morales continued, "about Mrs. Thompson's social media campaign designed to manipulate public opinion and potentially influence witnesses. This demonstrates a continued pattern of prioritizing her own interests over her children's welfare." Sarah's composed facade cracked slightly as the judge addressed her directly. "Mrs. Thompson, your attempt to coach your children during supervised visits, asking them to keep secrets about our conversations, and questioning them about their father's behavior, shows you haven't yet learned to put their emotional needs above your desire to control the narrative." The most damning evidence had been Dr. Chen's report on the children's progress. Jake and Tommy's dramatic improvement in the stable environment at Kevin's house provided clear contrast to their deterioration during the months of escalating conflict at home. Both children show significant trauma responses that correlate with the timeline of domestic violence incidents, the judge read from Dr. Chen's evaluation. They demonstrate hypervigilance, regression in development, and learned behaviors consistent with living in a household where violence is normalized. But it was Jake's own words, spoken during his private interview with the court-appointed guardian ad litem, that seemed to carry the most weight. "I don't want to live somewhere where people throw things when they're mad. It makes my stomach hurt when grown-ups yell." Judge Morales announced her decision with the clinical precision required by law, but I could hear compassion underneath her professional tone. "The court finds that it is in the best interest of both minor children to reside primarily with their father, Michael Thompson. Mrs. Thompson is granted supervised visitation every other Saturday for 4 hours, with supervision to continue until she completes court-mandated anger management, counseling, and can demonstrate consistent emotional regulation. The final custody agreement also required Sarah to attend individual therapy for a minimum of 6 months, with her therapist providing quarterly reports to the court about her progress. She was prohibited from discussing the legal proceedings or making negative comments about me during her visits with the children. Additionally, the judge continued. Mrs. Thompson is ordered to cease all social media posts about this case or about the children's living situation. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate suspension of visitation rights. Sarah's face went white as the full implications of the ruling sank in. Her attorney whispered something urgent in her ear, but Sarah seemed stunned into silence. The financial aspects of the divorce were equally decisive. Sarah's use of marital assets to fund her affair with Marcus resulted in her receiving a smaller portion of our property division. The judge noted that financial infidelity demonstrated poor judgment and dishonesty that extended beyond the marital relationship. Mr. Thompson will retain primary residence in the family home once Mrs. Thompson vacates the premises within 30 days. Child support will be minimal given the custody arrangement, but Mr. Thompson will maintain the children's health insurance and extracurricular activities. As we left the courthouse, David handed me the official custody agreement, a thick document that would govern our family relationships for the foreseeable future. The papers felt heavy with both relief and sadness. Relief that my children's safety was now legally protected. Sadness that 15 years of marriage had been reduced to court orders and supervised visits. This is one of the clearest custody decisions I've seen in cases involving domestic violence, David told me as we walked to our cars. Judge Morales recognized that your primary concern was protecting the children, not punishing your ex-wife. The final custody agreement wasn't just legal documentation. It was validation that I'd made the right choice in leaving, that the evidence spoke louder than Sarah's manipulation, and that the legal system could sometimes distinguish between truth and carefully constructed lies. Most importantly, it meant Jake and Tommy could stop wondering about their future and start building the stable, peaceful childhood they deserved. Moving back into our family home felt like returning to a crime scene at first. The house held too many memories of conflict, manipulation, and fear. But as Jake and Tommy ran through rooms they hadn't seen in 4 months, their excitement reminded me that this house had also been their childhood home, filled with birthday parties, Christmas mornings, and bedtime stories. Our stuff is still here, Tommy exclaimed, discovering his toy box exactly where he'd left it. My superhero guys were waiting for me. Sarah had vacated the premises as ordered by the court, taking only her personal belongings and leaving the house surprisingly clean. She'd removed most traces of her presence, photos from the walls, her books from the shelves, the decorative items that had reflected her taste. What remained was a blank canvas for Jake, Tommy, and me to create something new. The lease agreement for our new beginning wasn't actually a lease at all. It was our mortgage, our permanent address, our foundation for rebuilding. But it felt like starting over in a space that was finally, truly ours. The first change I made was painting over the wall where Sarah had thrown Tommy's truck during her calculated performance for the police. Jake helped me choose the color, a warm blue that he said looked peaceful, like Uncle Kevin's house. As we rolled paint over the damaged drywall, we were literally covering the evidence of our former life with something brighter. Tommy's room required the most attention. During the months we'd been gone, it had become a shrine to his absence. Toys arranged too neatly, bed made with military precision, everything exactly as a 5-year-old would never actually keep it. We spent an afternoon properly messing it up, building fort with blankets and filling the space with his natural chaos. Now it feels like home again, Tommy declared, surrounded by stuffed animals and action figures in gloriously random arrangements. I hired a housekeeper to help maintain the house, not because I couldn't manage it myself, but because I wanted to focus my energy on being present for my children, rather than constantly managing domestic tasks. Maria, a warm woman in her 50s who'd raised 4 children of her own, became part of our extended family within weeks. This house has good energy now, she told me one afternoon while folding laundry. Before, when I cleaned for the previous family, there was always tension in the air. Now it feels like a home where children can be children. The boys thrived in the familiar yet transformed environment. Jake resumed his friendship with Connor next door, no longer worried about whether his friend's family believed Sarah's social media version of our story. Tommy discovered that Rusty, Kevin and Linda's dog, could come for play dates now that we had our own yard again. Our new routines emphasized stability and joy. Saturday morning pancakes became a tradition, with each of us taking turns choosing the flavor. Blueberry for Jake, chocolate chip for Tommy, plain with real maple syrup for me. Sunday afternoons were for family activities, visiting museums, hiking local trails, or simply reading together in the living room. I joined a support group for single parents at our community center. connecting with other mothers and fathers who were rebuilding their families after difficult divorces. The group provided both practical advice and emotional validation, reminding me that our situation wasn't unique and that healing was possible. The hardest part, shared Jennifer, a mother of 3 whose ex-husband had been emotionally abusive, is learning to trust your own parenting instincts again after years of having them undermined. Her words resonated deeply. Sarah's constant criticism of my parenting had made me second-guess every decision, every interaction with our children. Now free from that toxic dynamic, I was rediscovering confidence in my ability to guide Jake and Tommy with love and wisdom. The boys adapted to their new reality with the resilience that children possess when they feel truly safe. They understood that Mommy was working on learning to manage her feelings better, and that their supervised visits were part of helping her practice being a better parent. "I hope Mommy gets better," Jake said one evening as we discussed his latest visit with Sarah. "But I'm glad we don't have to live with her until she does." His mature perspective, free from guilt or blame, showed me that children can understand adult problems when presented with honesty and appropriate context. Tommy's adjustment was even more straightforward. At 5, he was primarily concerned with whether his needs were met consistently and lovingly. When I asked him how he felt about our new life, his response was beautifully simple. "I like it when nobody's mad all the time." The house gradually filled with new memories that weren't overshadowed by conflict. Jake's art projects covering the refrigerator, Tommy's elaborate block cities sprawling across the living room floor, the sound of genuine laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent with tension for too long. Our lease agreement for happiness wasn't a legal document. It was a daily commitment to choosing peace over chaos, honesty over manipulation, and love over fear. Every morning I woke up in that house was a reminder that we'd not just survived Sarah's toxicity, but had created something better in its absence. 1 year after that terrible night when Sarah threw the ceramic vase, Jake and Tommy presented me with a Father's Day card they'd made together. The front showed a drawing of our family, the 3 of us standing in front of our house, all smiling, with a big sun overhead and flowers in the garden. Inside, in Jake's careful cursive and Tommy's enthusiastic printing, they'd written, "Thank you for keeping us safe and making us happy. You're the best dad ever." That handmade card, with its crooked hearts and glitter glue fingerprints, represented everything we'd fought to protect and everything we'd managed to build together. It wasn't just a Father's Day gift. It was evidence of 2 children who felt secure enough to express love without fear, creativity without criticism, and hope without reservation. The journey to reach this moment had been harder than anything I'd ever experienced. There were nights when I'd questioned every decision, wondering if I'd destroyed our family for problems that might have been fixable. There were custody exchanges where Sarah's tears made me doubt whether I was being cruel rather than protective. There were moments when the loneliness of single parenthood felt overwhelming, but watching my children rediscover their natural joy and resilience had taught me that love sometimes requires difficult choices. Real love, the kind that puts children's well-being above adult comfort, safety above familiarity, truth above convenience, doesn't always look like staying together. Sometimes it looks like having the courage to walk away. Sarah had completed her court-mandated anger management program and 6 months of individual therapy. Her supervised visits with the boys had gradually improved as she learned to regulate her emotions and focus on their needs rather than her own agenda. She would never be the mother I'd once hoped she could be, but she was slowly becoming someone who could spend time with Jake and Tommy without causing them harm. "Mommy's getting better at not getting angry," Tommy observed after one of their recent visits. "She only got the mad face once, and then she took deep breaths like Dr. Chen taught us." The boys' ability to recognize healthy versus unhealthy behavior in adults was both heartbreaking and empowering. They'd learned too young that grown-ups weren't always safe or reliable, but they'd also learned that they deserved to be treated with kindness and respect, and that they could trust their own instincts about what felt right. I'd learned lessons too, painful ones about recognizing manipulation, setting boundaries, and trusting my parental instincts even when they conflicted with someone else's version of reality. Dr. Hendricks had helped me understand that my willingness to accommodate Sarah's behavior, hoping to preserve family harmony, had actually enabled her escalation. "Healthy relationships require both people to be accountable for their actions," she'd explained. "When you consistently accept unacceptable behavior, you're not being loving, you're being codependent." The support network we'd built extended far beyond Kevin and Linda's initial haven. Other single parents from my support group had become close friends. Jake's soccer coach, Mrs. Patterson from school, Maria, our housekeeper, Dr. Chen, the boys' therapist, all of these caring adults had helped create a community where my children felt supported and valued. I'd also reconnected with friendships that had withered during the years of walking on eggshells around Sarah's moods, college friends I'd lost touch with, work colleagues I'd kept at arm's length to avoid uncomfortable questions about my marriage, neighbors I'd been too embarrassed to be honest with about our problems. The isolation that had made Sarah's manipulation more effective had been replaced by a network of people who knew our real story and chose to support our healing. But perhaps the most profound change was in my relationship with my children. Free from the constant tension of managing Sarah's emotions, I could be fully present for Jake and Tommy's childhood. I could laugh at their jokes without wondering if the sound would trigger someone's irritation. I could address their misbehavior calmly without worrying about setting off an adult's explosive reaction. "Daddy," Jake said one evening as we played board games at the kitchen table, "remember when we used to have to whisper all the time?" "I remember, buddy. How does it feel now?" "Like we can be ourselves," he said simply. That phrase, "we can be ourselves," captured everything our escape had accomplished. In leaving Sarah's toxic environment, we hadn't just gained physical safety. We'd reclaimed our authentic selves, our natural expressions of joy and sorrow, our right to exist without constant fear of someone else's emotional volatility. The Father's Day card my children made me wasn't just celebrating my role as their parent. It was celebrating our survival, our recovery, and our transformation from a family defined by fear into a family built on trust, respect, and genuine love. To anyone reading this who recognizes their own situation in our story, I want you to know that leaving is possible, healing is real, and your children's safety is worth more than preserving a relationship that harms them. Trust your instincts, document everything, reach out for help, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say, enough. Our new beginning didn't erase the pain we'd experienced, but it proved that hope could grow from the broken pieces of what we'd lost. The Father's Day card sitting on my desk with its handprint hearts and crayon promises reminded me every day that love doesn't have to hurt. Families don't have to live in fear, and sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. If you've ever had to choose between staying for love and leaving for safety, know that you're not alone. Share your story, seek support, and remember that your children's peace is worth fighting for. Together, we can break the cycle and build something better. The handmade card from my children wasn't just a Father's Day gift. It was proof that we'd not only survived our crisis, but had emerged stronger, safer, and more authentically ourselves than we'd ever been before.